That Hale woman. Best you don't meet her eye.
Miss Hale. Are you?
I'm fine. Thank you. I'm fine. Who did this? It's the carpenter. If I let myself be grateful, I'll get to needing it. And then where will I be?
The gold light came across the plank floor the way it did every morning that winter, slow and low, and reaching all the way to the far wall before the town had even stirred. Ruth Hale stood in the middle of it, with her hands pressed flat to her apron, and she could not make herself move, because a man was standing in her doorway, saying the thing no one in that town had said to her in 2 years. "I built it to face east," Amos Ford told her, "so the first light would find you. I've been at it since the frost came. I didn't know how else to tell you." She looked at the window. She looked at the light, pooled warm across the boards, and something in her chest that had been holding itself very still for a long time gave way all at once. But you cannot understand what that morning cost either of them, unless you go back to the first snow, back to when they had not yet spoken a full sentence to one another, though they had lived across the same frozen road for the better part of a year. Let me take you there. Nebraska, in the winter of 1885, was a country that did not forgive much. The town was called Halstead, a scatter of frame buildings along a single rutted street, a church with a cracked bell, a mercantile that smelled of coal oil and molasses, and beyond it all, the great white silence of the plains rolling out to a sky the color of a knife. The first snow came early that year, thick and quiet, and it settled over the rooftops the way a sheet settles over furniture in a house that no one lives in anymore. Ruth Hale lived at the north end of that street in 2 narrow rooms above nothing, no shop below her, only a cold storeroom she could not afford to fill. She was 27 years old, and by the reckoning of the town she was already finished. A widow, worse than a widow. The kind whose husband had died in a way people whispered about with their hands cupped over their mouths in the mercantile. Thomas Hale had been a charming man, and a reckless one, and he had gone through the ice on the river 2 winters back, chasing a bet he'd made in poor judgment, and he had left Ruth with his debts and his name, and the particular shame of a woman whom the town had decided, without asking her, must have driven him to it. She had not driven him to anything. She had begged him not to go. But grief is a strange animal, and Ruth carried inside her a guilt she could not reason away. The thought, in the black hours, that if she had been a different sort of wife, a prettier or a lighter or a more pleasing sort, he might have wanted to stay home by the fire instead of walking out onto that ice. She kept her dignity, though. That was the thing about Ruth Hale that the town never saw, because they had already decided not to look. Every morning she rose before light. She heated her flat iron on the stove, and she pressed the seams of other people's clothes, and she worked her treadle machine until the rhythm of it filled the little rooms like a heartbeat. Rock and click, the one steady sound in a life gone otherwise silent. She took in mending. She let out the seams of Sunday coats, and she turned frayed collars, and she hemmed the trousers of men who would not meet her eye when they came to collect their orders. Her hands were quick and clever, and calloused hard along the fingertips from the needle, and there was not a finer seamstress in 3 counties, though not one soul in Halstead would have said so aloud. Across the road, in a low shop that smelled always of pine pitch and fresh-cut sawdust, lived Amos Ford. Amos was 29, and he was a carpenter, and he was the shyest man in the county. He was tall and broad through the shoulders, with hands that could gentle a plane along an oak board and leave it smooth as water, and he could not, for the life of him, string together 3 words to a person's face without the old stammer rising up in his throat to choke them off. That stammer had been beaten into him young. His father had been a hard man with a hard tongue, a man who measured worth in noise and quickness, and who had looked at his quiet, watchful boy and pronounced a verdict over him again and again until the boy believed it. You'll never amount to much, Amos. A man who can't speak can't lead. Your hands are the only thing about you worth a nickel. So Amos had learned to live inside his hands. He said nothing, and he built everything. He made the pews the town sat in on Sunday and never thought about. He made the cradles their children slept in and the coffins they were buried in. And he did it all without ever once being seen, because he had decided, long ago, that being seen was not a thing that was allowed to him. He faced his work. He did not face the world. And he watched Ruth Hale. He would never have told a living soul, but he had watched her for the better part of a year. He watched her cross the road in the gray dawn to draw water, wrapped in a shawl too thin for the cold. He watched her carry her bundles of mending with her chin up while the storekeeper's wife turned her back. He had seen, once, through her lit window on a winter evening, the way she sat alone at her machine with her shoulders bowed, and he had understood something about her that no one else in that town had troubled to understand, that she was not what they said she was, that she was proud and alone and quietly breaking, the same as him. He wanted to speak to her. He had rehearsed it 100 times in the dark of his shop, the words all lined up and orderly, and every time she came near, the words scattered like sparrows, and he ducked his head and became very busy with a board. Then came the morning she slipped on the ice. It was the first hard freeze, and the road had turned to glass under the new snow, and Ruth came out with her water bucket and went down all at once, hard, on the hip, the bucket clattering away and the cold water soaking through her skirts. She did not cry out. That was the thing Amos would remember. She simply sat there in the road for a moment, in the gray light, gathering herself, too proud to make a sound. He was across the road before he knew he had moved. He got his arm under hers and lifted her, careful as he could, and she came up wet and shaking and mortified, and he opened his mouth to ask if she was hurt. Are you?" The stammer caught him. His face went red. "Are you?" "I'm fine," Ruth said quickly, sparing them both. She would not look at him. "Thank you, I'm fine." And she took her bucket and went inside, and the door shut, and Amos stood alone in the road, with his heart going like a hammer, and every word he had wanted to say still locked up useless in his chest. That was the whole of their acquaintance for a long time. A fall on the ice, 3 broken words, a door. But something had started in Amos that morning that his tongue could not stop, because it did not live in his tongue. It lived in his hands. The next morning, Ruth opened her door to find the ice on her step chipped away clean, sanded rough with ash so a body could stand. She looked up and down the empty road and saw no one. She thought perhaps the wind had done it, though she knew the wind did no such thing. A week on, the loose board on her stair, the one that had wobbled dangerously since October, was quietly, solidly fixed, the new nails set flush, the old wood cleaned. She had not asked anyone. She could not have paid anyone. She stood on that firm step in the cold and felt the strangest thing move through her, and she did not have a name for it yet. Her window sash had let the wind through all winter, whistling thin and cold through the night. One frozen morning she woke, and the whistling was gone, and when she went to look, she found the gap packed tight with clean tow and sealed with a bead of putty smoothed by a careful thumb. She began to watch. She could not help it. And one gray dawn, from behind her curtain she saw him, the big quiet carpenter from across the road, kneeling at her woodpile in the half-dark, stacking split kindling he had cut himself against her wall where she would find it. He worked fast and low, glancing up at her dark window as though terrified of being caught, and when he was done he slipped back across the frozen road to his own door and was gone. Ruth stood a long time behind that curtain. She thought at first that she ought to be angry or afraid or ashamed to be the object of a man's attention when her name was already worth so little in that town. But it was none of those things that she felt, because there was nothing in it that asked anything of her. He did not come to her door to be thanked. He did not do it where the town could see and make talk. He left no note, sought no credit, wanted nothing. He simply mended the broken things in her life, one by one, in the dark, and disappeared. And Ruth Hale, who had learned to expect that every kindness came with a hook in it, did not know what to do with a kindness that came with nothing at all. She was afraid of it. That was the truth. She had built her whole survival on needing no one, on carrying her own bundles with her chin up. And here was this man teaching her, without a single word, that she might be cared for. And a woman who has taught herself not to want things cannot afford to start wanting them again. It is too far to fall. If I let myself be grateful, she said aloud one night to her empty rooms, to the click and rock of her machine, I'll get to needing it. And then where will I be? But she baked him a small loaf of bread anyway, and left it on his shop step in the dark, the way he left things on hers. And in the morning it was gone, and that evening she found on her own step a spool of good wax thread and a paper of steel needles, the fine kind she could never spare the coin for, and no note at all. So it went, through the deep of that winter. Two people who could not speak, speaking, a mended latch, a loaf of bread, a shoveled path, a paper of needles, the whole slow, shy language of it, passing back and forth across a frozen road in the dark, while the town slept and knew nothing. Because kindness, in a town like Halstead, could not stay a secret forever. It was the storekeeper's wife who saw them, Mrs. Pruitt, who missed nothing and forgave less. She was up before light one morning with a sick child, and from her upstairs window she saw the carpenter cross the road and kneel at the widow Hale's woodpile, and she saw the widow's curtain move, and she drew her own conclusions and carried them straight to the mercantile the moment it opened. By noon it was all over town. The widow Hale, that Hale woman, the one whose husband had got her hooks into simple, decent Amos Ford, was drawing him across the road in the dark. A woman like that, a man like him, too soft in the head to know better. It came to Amos in the worst possible way. He was in the mercantile buying nails, and he heard two men talking by the stove, and he heard her name in their mouths, heard them laughing, heard the ugly shape they'd made of the one pure thing in his life. And behind them, in the corner, stood Ruth herself, come in for her thread money, gone white as the snow outside, her market basket held against her like a shield. Their eyes met across that store, and Amos, who cared for her deeply, who had built his whole silent winter around her, who wanted in that moment nothing on earth so much as to turn to those men and tell them what she truly was, felt the old verdict rise up and close his throat. You'll never amount to much. A man who can't speak can't lead. The men were watching him now, grinning, waiting to see what the simple carpenter would say, and the words would not come. They scattered, and into that silence, Amos did the thing he had trained himself his whole life to do. When the world looked at him and waited, he ducked his head, and he said, low and stammering, it's nothing to do with me. I hardly know the woman. And he paid for his nails, and he walked out. He did not see Ruth's face as he said it. He would spend a long time wishing he had, and a longer time glad he hadn't, because it would have broken him. She stood very still by the flour barrels while the store went quiet and satisfied around her. Then she set down her basket because she could not trust her hands, and she asked in a steady voice for her thread money, and she counted the coins, and she walked out into the snow with her chin up, the way she had walked out of every cruel room in that town for 2 years. She did not cry until she was home, and then she sat down at her machine and she wept the way she had not wept since they pulled Thomas from the river. Not loud, never loud, but with her whole body bowed over the treadle. And the machine did not run. For the first time in that long winter, Ruth Hale sat at her machine and did not work. The rooms went silent, a silence with no click in it, no rock, no heartbeat. Just the wind, and the cold, and the last of the light going out of the plank floor. Across the road, Amos Ford stood in his shop and hated himself with a completeness he had never known. He had done it again. He had faced away. His whole life he had let people say what they liked and never answered, and he had told himself it was only himself he was failing. But this time, his silence had struck someone else. This time, his ducked head had told a whole town that Ruth Hale was nothing to him. Ruth, who was the only something he had. His father's voice was very loud in the shop that night. All those old words, worn smooth as river stones from a lifetime of turning them over, that a man who couldn't speak was worth nothing but the work of his 2 hands. Amos looked at his hands, and slowly, in the cold, an answer came to him. If his hands were all he had, then by God, he would say it with his hands. He would say the whole of it, everything his mouth had never managed. He would build her the truth, so plain and so solid that no stammer could steal it, and no town could laugh it away. He worked all that night, and the night after, and every night for 2 weeks. He did not sleep more than a few hours. He hauled good lumber he had been saving for a job that could wait. And through her frozen window, Ruth sometimes saw his shop lit gold past midnight, and heard the low, patient sound of a saw, and she did not know what he was building, and she told herself she did not care. She had gone quiet by then, in the way that frightened her most, the after the river quiet. She pressed her seams and turned her collars, and she did not weep anymore, which was worse. She had let herself need it, just as she'd feared, and it had been taken, and she was learning all over again to live with the cold place where it had been. Then came the morning. The carpenter knocked on her door. 2 soft raps and a wait. The knock of a man who understood that a hard knock asks too much. Ruth opened it, and there he stood, hat in both hands against his chest, snow on his shoulders, his face gray with sleeplessness and something close to terror. "Miss Ruth," he said, I'd like you to come across the road. There's something I need to show you. Please." She almost refused. Everything in her, all her hard-won armor, told her to shut the door. But there was something in his face she had never seen in any face turned toward her in that town, and she wrapped her shawl about her, and she followed him across the frozen road, and the town watched from behind its curtains, and Amos Ford, for once in his life, did not care who saw. He opened the door of what had been his cold storeroom off the back of the shop, and he stepped aside to let her go in first. It was a room made new. He had planed and joined the walls smooth. He had laid a good tight floor. There was a work counter built to just her height, and shelves for cloth, and pegs for spools, and a wide, clean table for her cutting. A shop, a seamstress's shop, finished down to the last peg, better than anything in 3 counties, waiting empty for her. And on the far wall, where the morning would find it, he had set a great window. He had built the sash himself and glazed it with his own hands, and it faced east, full east, out over the white plains to where the sun came up. The gold light came across the new plank floor, slow and low, and reached all the way to the far wall. And Ruth Hales stood in the middle of it, with her hands pressed flat to her apron, and could not make herself move. "I built it to face east," Amos told her, "so the first light would find you. I've been at it since the frost came. I didn't know how else to tell you." He drew a breath, and the stammer rose, and for once he pushed straight through it. "I said I hardly knew you. In the store. I said it because I've been afraid my whole life, and afraid is all my father ever taught me to be. But it was a lie, Ruth. It was the worst lie I ever told. I know you better than I know my own name. I know you carry your bundles with your chin up. I know you take your coffee black, and you laugh when you think no one can see. And you've been kinder to me across that road than anyone's been in my whole life." His voice broke and held. "I can't always make the words come, but I can build. So I built you the truth. Every board of it is true." And Ruth, who had spent 2 years teaching herself to want nothing, felt the thing in her chest that had been holding so very still give way all at once. "Why east?" she whispered. It was all she could manage. "Because you've had a long night," Amos said, "and I wanted you to wake up every morning and see it end." She crossed that gold floor, and she took his big rough hands in her clever calloused ones, and neither of them said another word for a while, because none was needed. 2 people who could not speak had finally been heard. The town, of course, went on being the town, but something had changed, because Amos Ford had changed. When Mrs. Pruitt said a sharp word about Ruth Hale in the Mercantile that week, Amos was there, and he set down his nails, and though the stammer caught him twice, he said, clear enough for the whole store to hear, "That's my Ruth you're speaking of." And there's no finer woman in this county. You'd all do well to say so. It was not a long speech, but it was the bravest thing anyone in Halstead had ever heard him say, and it was made of iron, and it settled the matter more thoroughly than 100 words from a smoother man. Old Pastor Dallett came to see them himself, not to scold but to sit. A gentle, tired man who had buried Thomas Hale and had never once believed the ugly things the town said about Ruth. He looked at the new shop and the east window, and the two of them standing shy and close in the gold light, and he smiled. "Amos," he said, "you've built this woman a place in the light. Are you meaning to build her a life to go in it?" And Amos, red to the ears, said that he was, that he meant to ask her, when he found the nerve. He found it a week later, out where the creek ran under its skin of ice at the edge of town, with the whole white plain around them and no one to hear. He did not make a speech. He was never going to be a man who made speeches. He simply took a small thing from his pocket, a ring he had carved from a curl of applewood, smooth and warm and perfect, because his hands could make beautiful things even when his mouth could not, and he held it out to her on his broad palm. "I don't have pretty words," he said, "but I've got hands that'll never stop mending your broken things, and a roof, and a window that faces the right way. Marry me, Ruth. Let me build the rest." And Ruth Hale, who had once believed that every kindness came with a hook in it, looked at the man who had spent a whole winter asking nothing of her, and she began to laugh and cry at once, and she said yes. She set it into his coat, with his arms around her, out on the white edge of the frozen world. They married in the little church under the cracked bell that spring, and Ruth wore a dress she had made herself, and there was not a finer one in 3 counties. She hung out her seamstress's shingle in the shop with the east window, and the same women who had turned their backs came shy and needful to her door, because the truth is that talent will out, and so will goodness, given time, and Ruth had always had both. Some love faces the crowd and performs, and some love faces east, quiet and patient, and turned always toward the light it wants for you. It fixes the broken step in the dark and asks for no thanks. It builds a window facing the sunrise, because it cannot bear for you to wake in the dark one more morning. In the years after, folks passing the shop at dawn would sometimes see them through that great east window, the carpenter and the seamstress, 2 chairs pulled close, sitting together in the first gold light with their coffee, saying nothing at all. They had never needed many words, those two. They had the light and the warmth and each other, and every morning it found them there, exactly as he had built it to. Ruth woke every morning of her long and happy life without bracing for the cold, and that, more than any word ever spoken, was how she knew she was home.